Of course, Georgia is only one of the states where a legal challenge is taking place. So here to give us an update on other litigation across the country is Matt Schlapp. He's the chairman of the American Conservative Union and one of the individuals leading the fight to verify the election results in the state of Nevada. So, Matt, I know that you had a busy week last week and you still got a lot on your plate moving forward ahead, but I do want to touch on where you stand regarding those legal fights. I know that you've been very busy in Nevada in particular. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And today we filed our appeal to the Nevada Supreme Court. I think what's important for people to understand about so many of these challenges, and in Nevada, our challenge focused on clear evidence of tens of thousands of illegal ballots that are in the count. But unfortunately, the Democrats, the Biden lawyers, said that in order to prove that illegal voting, you would have to depose those voters. And the judge agreed with that being the standard, which is a rather absurd standard, especially because they don't allow us the depositions to actually go through all the wrongdoing. So I just want all your viewers to understand that they found over 130,000 illegal ballots in the count. This is overwhelming fraud in the state of Nevada, 4 times more fraud than we'd need to change the results. This is also true in Georgia. This is true in Pennsylvania. This is true throughout these states. One simple standard: you only get to vote if you're on the voting rolls legally, and you don't get to vote if you're not. That's what's at stake.
And Matt, I'm glad you brought that up because, for example, there have been instances where they have found irregularities. For example, in Georgia and Michigan, where there were votes flipped from one side to the other, there are provable things of voter fraud that we've seen so far. It's not necessarily an allegation. And this seems like stuff that you're talking about right now, for example, that comes out during discovery of the court process, something that we would typically see when the litigation is ongoing, not beforehand. I mean, that seems like it almost makes the litigation moot if that were to be the standard. Is that what you're seeing right now?
Yes, that's right. But there's also, take a step back, Alex. I mean, present company not included, but I mean, whatever happened to the national media and their desire to get the story, to win the Pulitzer because they found out that the facts are different than are being widely reported? Instead, what I have witnessed in the state of Nevada by national news agencies is this constant mantra that there's no significant illegal voting, which is completely contrary to the facts. And what reporters will say to me is, well, show us your evidence. And I think that's fine. But whatever happened to the media trying to go out there and trying to find the truth? I find it very troubling that when it comes to Donald Trump, they all just put their hands up and they're ready for a timeout. And at these points in our democracy, we need the media to be engaged. For instance, we need the media to be engaged on the fact that Clark County, the largest county in Nevada, threw out a county commission race. Democrats threw out one of their own races because they said there was too many voter anomalies, right? Voter irregularities, things they couldn't explain. They later reversed course, but you know, the fraud that went on because of the Stacey Abrams attempt to get people who are not legal voters to vote has got us in a crisis.
Yeah, I mean, it would be an interesting standard to apply that retroactively, looking back at every big news story that's ever broken and said, well, there has to be evidence first before you report on Watergate or whatever it is. I mean,
yeah, and we have to find it.
Yeah,
that's the thing. The reporters don't have to find it. The Trump supporters are the ones. The onus is on their back, even though they're getting no help from state authorities. We don't have access to all the data, but we have to come up and prove it. And that's fine. We can meet that standard, but it's not a standard that safeguards this somehow respect for political reporters who are literally writing no stories other than, oh, isn't it exciting, all these great people that Joe Biden wants to pick for his future cabinet.
And the prospect of a dog coming back to the White House. That's an article that we were covering last week, which is just not a news story. But I do want to touch on this before I let you go as well, because when we look at what is happening in Nevada, a lot of
By the way, Alex, just so you know, that dog is a real killer, because if you think about it, that dog, almost took Joe Biden down the stairs in the nude.
I mean, it's
a hell of a story.
Put him up with the hero class the same way that took down al-Baghdadi. What was that, Conan, I believe? We got 2 fighters that are serving our country. But when we look at the case in Nevada as well, a lot of people are saying it's a petri dish, if you will, for a lot of the allegations that are being seen in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan. So is the end goal for all of this? Is it to put together a comprehensive case that will go to the Supreme Court, or is this something that will be fought on a state-by-state basis?
What the Supreme Court needs to consider is if we stood up for the civil rights of voters in the 1950s and 60s when the Democrats were pushing Jim Crow, what about the 73.3 million Trump voters, including, huge increases in African American voters, Hispanic voters, Jewish voters, Catholic voters? What do we say to them when their civil rights are disenfranchised by the Democrats all over again? Do we just simply turn a blind eye toward it? We didn't do that in the middle part of the last century. The Supreme Court stood up and said, no, you have to be able to vote. That's a fundamental democratic right in America. How can they not say the same thing today to half the country that was disenfranchised because of illegal voting in the country? And to the conservative and constitutionalist justices on that court, they have to ask themselves, do they ever want a constitutionalist to join them on that court? Because if we allow this illegal voting to go forward, the Republican Party will never occupy the White House again, will never pick another Supreme Court justice who will uphold the strict interpretation of the Constitution, which means America will just wither away. That's what's at stake, and I think that's what they have to consider.
No, it's a sacred right that's at the heart of our democracy. And in fact, I think a lot of Republicans are starting to acknowledge that. Even Senator Ted Cruz saying earlier today that if the Pennsylvania case were to make its way to the Supreme Court, he's willing to give oral arguments. And that's a step further than I've seen a lot of Republican senators make up to this point. So I think they're starting to recognize the severity of this as well. But Matt Schlapp, I appreciate you coming on the program tonight, giving us an update of all these legal cases. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.